What you're about to hear is the story of a guy who came home early one Wednesday and accidentally overheard his entire relationship being turned into a production. His girlfriend and her 3 friends were sitting in his apartment, planning a staged fake breakup, complete with a script, 3 camera angles, and a crowded public market picked out for maximum drama. They wanted him desperate. They wanted him begging. They wanted it on video so it could go viral. What they didn't know was that he heard every single word of the plan. And when Saturday came, he walked straight into it without blinking. This one hits different. She staged a breakup, her friends watching. I didn't argue. I said, "Done. Enjoy your freedom." Their laughter died instantly. I came home early on a Wednesday evening and stood in my own hallway for 20 minutes listening to my girlfriend plan how to publicly humiliate me for social media content. That sentence still feels surreal to type, but here we are. I'd been with Melissa for 2.5 years at that point. We lived together in a converted loft in Lincoln Park. It was a good apartment, the kind of place you feel like you earned. High ceilings, good light, close enough to walk to anything worth walking to. I'd been putting in long hours on a client account that quarter, and the relationship had been showing some strain because of it. Not blow-up level strain, just that slow drift where you notice someone isn't quite as present as they used to be. I chalked most of it up to the work schedule. Melissa had started building an audience online the year before, posting lifestyle content, and things had gradually started to shift in ways I couldn't quite name at the time. She was more focused on her phone, more tuned into what her friends were doing, more interested in how things looked than how they felt. I noticed it, but I didn't push it. I figured it was a phase. I was wrong about that, as it turns out. The afternoon I came home early, I'd cut a client meeting short because the other party rescheduled, and I didn't have a reason to stay downtown. When I got back to the building and stepped off the elevator, I could hear voices before I even reached my door. Melissa's and 3 others, Brooke, Whitney, and Jenna, her 3 closest friends. The door was slightly open. I slowed down, not sure if I was interrupting something, and that's when I heard Brooke's voice clearly. She was the de facto leader of that group, always had been. She was talking about Belmont Market. Saturday at 2 p.m., maximum foot traffic, lots of witnesses. I stopped. Whitney said she'd be at a nearby table filming from the side angle. Jenna would be at the coffee stand with the front shot. Multiple angles for editing options. I stood there with my hand near the door frame, trying to catch up with what I was hearing. They weren't talking about someone else's situation. They were talking about mine. Melissa asked what if I suspected something. She mentioned I'd probably find it weird that she suddenly wanted to go to Belmont Market on a Saturday. Jenna told her to use the new crepe place as the excuse. Everyone had been posting about it. Just say she wanted to try it and make it sound spontaneous and casual. A normal lunch. Then Brooke ran through the script. She told Melissa to say she'd been feeling disconnected, that she thought they wanted different things in life. Keep it vague so I'd start asking questions, then hit me with the real line. Melissa said, "And then I say, I think we should take a permanent break?" Whitney's voice went up. That was exactly it, but the key was staying calm while I fell apart. The contrast was everything. Melissa composed and in control. Me begging and desperate. That's what goes viral. Brooke talked about her last breakup video. She said it hit 2.3 million views, but this one would do better because I had no idea it was coming. Pure gold. Genuine shock. And then Melissa, quietly, said she didn't know if she could watch me actually suffer. Jenna laughed it off. She said it wouldn't be real suffering, just a test of devotion. After a few days, Melissa would reveal it was fake and film the makeup moment too, the sequel content, the he proved his love angle. People eat that up. Brooke backed her up. If I really loved Melissa, I'd fight for her. If I didn't fight hard enough, then Melissa would know the truth. Then Melissa asked in this small voice, "But what if he just accepts it?" All 3 of them laughed. Not a polite laugh, a genuinely amused laugh, like she'd said something so ridiculous it didn't even register as a real possibility. Brooke said no man lets his girlfriend walk away in public without making a scene, especially not somewhere as crowded as Belmont Market. He'll beg. They always do. I stood there for another 30 seconds, long enough to hear them start refining the plan. The backup moves if I didn't react right, the hashtags that might trend, the caption drafts. Then I backed away, took the elevator down to the lobby, and sat in my car. I sat there for 20 minutes. I want to be clear. It wasn't anger I felt, at least not in the way most people would expect. There wasn't a hot rush of it. What settled in was something colder and more focused. Something that felt, honestly, a lot like clarity. These women had mapped out my behavior and built an entire production around it. They were so certain about how I'd react that they'd scripted the whole thing in advance. They were counting on me being predictable, emotional, easy to trigger. I wasn't going to give them that. I drove out to my sister Claire's place in Evanston. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without a word. I sat at her kitchen table and told her everything. By the time I finished, she was pacing with her hands balled at her sides. She said she'd warned me about the influencer circle, that it had been pulling Melissa away from anything real. She was right. She asked what I was going to do. I told her, give Melissa exactly what she asked for. She wanted a breakup. She'd get one. No questions, no fighting, no performance. She stared at me. In public? In front of the cameras? I said especially in front of the cameras. They want a show, they'll get one. Just not the one they planned. Claire studied me for a long moment. She said if I did this, the relationship was probably over for real. I said I knew. But if Melissa was willing to stage that kind of thing, maybe it already was. Claire squeezed my hand and told me I deserved better than that. I drove home around 11. Melissa was in bed scrolling her phone, completely normal. She kissed me goodnight like she hadn't spent the afternoon planning to publicly dismantle me 3 days from now. I lay there in the dark for a long time, thinking about the real parts of the last 2 years. The early parts, before follower counts started mattering more than actual connection. We'd been good. We'd been genuinely good for a while. That part was worth acknowledging, even if it made what was coming harder. Then I thought about Saturday. They wanted to see how I'd react. I was going to show them. Hold on. Let me jump in here. And for anyone listening, this is me, the host, not Kevin talking. I need you to sit with what just happened. Kevin heard every word of the plan being built around him, walked back to the elevator, drove to his sister's, and made a decision from a place of complete calm. No confrontation, no blow-up, no storming back inside. He took the information, filed it, and chose strategy over reaction. Most people would have detonated on the spot. Kevin turned it into a plan. That's the whole difference. That's what the rest of this story runs on. Thursday and Friday moved in slow motion. Melissa was clearly in her head, a little distant, going through the motions of normal life while rehearsing something else in the background. Friday morning, over coffee, she mentioned she'd been wanting to try that new crepe place at Belmont Market. Wanted to go Saturday around 2. I pretended to think for a second. Sure, sounds good. Her face brightened immediately, but I could see the nerves flickering just underneath it. That evening, I could hear her in the bedroom quietly running through the lines. The cadence, the pauses. I think we want different things in life. I need to be true to myself. She was working out the delivery, preparing for the camera like it was an audition. Saturday arrived, and she spent extra time getting ready. The kind of outfit that looks effortless, but has clearly been thought about. Casual, but photographs well. We walked over to Belmont Market together just before 2. The place was loud and packed, the way it always is on a weekend afternoon. Families, tourists, locals moving in every direction, vendors calling out specials. The smell of food and coffee layered over everything. I spotted the setup the second we walked into the main corridor. Whitney at a table about 15 feet from where we'd be sitting. Phone on a small tripod angled directly at us. Jenna at the coffee stand another 20 feet back, phone in hand, watching the room. 3 camera angles, exactly as discussed. Melissa set her phone face up on the table when we sat down. Voice memo app open. I ordered a crepe with ham and cheese. She got strawberries and cream. We made small talk while the food came. She kept glancing toward Whitney every few minutes. I kept eating. Finally, she took a long breath. She said she needed to talk to me about something serious. I set down my fork, wiped my mouth, and gave her my full attention. Sure, what's on your mind? She went through it perfectly. She'd been thinking about us a lot, about where things were headed. She felt like we'd fallen into a pattern, and she wasn't sure we were on the same page anymore. She said she thought we might want different things in life. I set my fork down and looked at her directly. Are you breaking up with me? She blinked. She'd been expecting more back and forth, more openings for the script to play out. She recovered quickly. She said she needed to be true to herself, that this wasn't working for her anymore. Perfect delivery, calm, measured, the strong woman making a hard choice. This was where I was supposed to crack open, ask what I did wrong, grab her hand, get loud, get emotional, give them the content they'd driven across the city for. I nodded once. Okay, just that. One word, sitting in the air between us. Melissa's composure shifted. Not dramatically, just a small fracture in the expression she'd been holding together. She said, okay. I told her if that was what she wanted, I respected it. Then I picked my fork back up and took another bite. She stared at me. None of this was in the script. She asked if I wasn't going to ask why, if I wasn't even going to try to talk about it. I finished chewing, taking my time. I told her she'd just said this wasn't working for her, and that we wanted different things. I wasn't going to try to talk her into staying in something that didn't work for her. That wouldn't be fair to either of us. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Whitney shift uncomfortably at her table. Then Melissa tried the line she must have thought would finally unlock me. She asked, "Don't you want to fight for us?" I set my fork down and looked at her with what I hope appeared to be genuine confusion. I said she'd just told me we wanted different things, that our relationship wasn't working. I asked what exactly I'd be fighting for. Silence. The market moved around us like nothing was happening. Vendors, strollers, the hiss of espresso machines in the background. At our table, nothing moved. I pulled out my wallet and put cash down. Enough to cover both meals with a solid tip. I told her I'd move my things out this week, that she could keep the apartment since the lease was in her name, and that I'd transfer my half of the month's rent by Monday. Her eyes went wide. She asked if I was just accepting this. Just like that. I stood and put on my jacket, doing each button at my own pace. When I looked at her again, I made sure my voice was clear. Loud enough that Whitney's angle would pick it up. Loud enough for Jenna at the coffee stand. Loud enough for the tables nearby. "Enjoy your freedom, Melissa." And I walked out. No hesitation. No last glance back. No frame of the desperate, broken performance they'd spent a week preparing for. I stepped out onto the street and kept moving. The afternoon was cold and bright. I found a bench in the small park 2 blocks over and sat down for 20 minutes, watching people walk dogs and push strollers. Then I called Claire. She asked how it went. I told her I said okay and left. She laughed for a solid 5 seconds before asking if I was serious. Then she said Melissa was going to call me. I told her I knew. Okay, stop. And I just want to sit in this for a second. 3 cameras rolling. Script in full motion. Every domino lined up for Kevin to fall apart in front of a packed market on a Saturday afternoon. And instead, one word. He paid the check, buttoned up his jacket, and walked out. They needed him desperate and unraveling. They got him completely calm and completely gone. That footage is worthless. Worse than worthless, it shows exactly what Brooke said they couldn't afford. Melissa looking cold, Kevin looking reasonable. Every second of planning, for nothing. While I was sitting on that bench, Melissa was having a meltdown inside the market. I found out about it later through Leo, who heard it from Claire, who heard it from Melissa herself. After I left, Melissa sat frozen for a full minute. Whitney rushed over from her table. Jenna came from the coffee stand. Brooke came from wherever she'd been positioned. Melissa told them I just agreed and walked out. Whitney scrolled through the footage and said it was unusable. No drama, no emotion, nothing they could work with. Jenna said the same thing from her angle. He looks reasonable. You look cold. Brooke watched the clip and said something that apparently hit Melissa harder than all the rest. He talked about moving out like he was relieved. Melissa said I wasn't supposed to react that way. He was supposed to fight. Whitney said plainly, "We can't post this. It backfires on us completely." Meanwhile, I was calling Leo. I asked if he was free and told him I needed help moving. He didn't ask questions over the phone. He just showed up. I'd actually been looking at backup apartments for a few weeks. Something had felt off at home for longer than I wanted to admit, and I'd started quietly looking at options out of some instinct I didn't fully examine at the time. So when I'd called a realtor contact that morning, he moved fast. Furnished short-term place in River North. Smaller, but available immediately. Clean and simple and mine. Leo met Claire and me at the old apartment. Melissa wasn't back yet. We moved systematically. By 6 that evening, everything I owned was in the new place. A decent loft with big windows and exposed brick. It felt honest in a way the old apartment hadn't in longer than I could pinpoint. I stood in the middle of the new living room, boxes stacked around me. Claire put her hand on my shoulder and asked if I was okay. I told her yeah, I actually was. I texted Melissa, moved out, keys on the kitchen counter. Rent transfer hits your account Monday. Take care. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then my phone started ringing. I sent it to voicemail. Leo ordered pizza. Claire stayed. The 3 of us ate at my new kitchen table, and I walked them through the whole planning session again from memory. The camera positions, the scripted lines, the hashtag conversation, all of it. Leo sat back with his jaw slightly open. He said he wished he could have seen their faces when I said okay and reached for my jacket. My phone kept going. I let it. The next morning I woke up in my new apartment. Strange but quiet. No tension, no walking on eggshells, no ambient sense that something was slightly wrong. Just my own space, my own morning, my own pace. Melissa called around 11. I answered. She said maybe she'd been hasty, that she was stressed and emotional, that maybe we should talk in person. I walked to the window. I told her stress was apparently what made her decide we wanted different things. That sounded like something worth thinking carefully about. She said, what if she told me she'd made a mistake? I said I'd tell her to get sure about what she actually wanted. That breaking up and getting back together on impulse wasn't a healthy pattern for either of us. She pushed back on the word impulse. She said she was telling me she was wrong. I pointed out that yesterday she'd been certain enough to end things in public. Today she was certain she was wrong. I asked how I was supposed to know tomorrow wouldn't bring another certainty in a new direction. A long pause. Then quietly, because I love you. She loved me yesterday too. It didn't stop her. Then she asked if I was just throwing away 2.5 years. I told her she was the one who ended it yesterday. I was accepting her decision. She hung up. Pause for a second. This is me, not Kevin. For anyone just coming in. What she keeps running into and can't name is this. He won't argue. And you can't fight someone who refuses to fight back. She came in expecting guilt or anger or some opening she could wedge herself into. He gave her a clean wall every time. His limits aren't sharp because he's being cruel. They're sharp because he actually believes he deserves them. And when someone holds a line that quietly, it does something to the person on the other side that yelling never would. She's realizing that now, the hard way. The next few days passed steadily. Melissa sent several messages and I responded to some, ignored others. She brought up the idea of working things out with a professional. I left that one unread. She mentioned a trip we'd planned together for the fall. I texted back that she had full freedom to make new plans now. Then one evening came a message. Everyone thinks you're being childish. I thought about it for a moment, then replied, everyone being your friends who staged the whole thing. Their read on maturity is noted. She went quiet after that. Tuesday I focused on work, settled deeper into the new routine. It felt productive, clear. Wednesday evening I heard a knock on my door. I checked the peephole. Melissa. Claire had given her my address despite me asking her specifically not to. Claire and I would be having a conversation about that later. I opened the door but didn't move aside to let her in. Just stood in the doorway. She said she needed to tell me something. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying in the elevator. I said I was listening. She looked past me into the apartment, clearly hoping I'd wave her inside. When I didn't move, she took a breath and said, Saturday wasn't entirely real. I asked what that meant. She struggled to find the framing. Her friends thought it would be good to test whether I'd fight for the relationship, to see how I'd respond under pressure. I kept my expression even. Test. You tested me. She said it sounded bad when I put it that way. I asked how it should sound. She staged a fake breakup to observe my reaction. Her voice started rising in the hallway. She said I was supposed to show her I cared. I was supposed to act like losing her meant something. I said, by begging, by making a scene, by performing grief on camera so you'd have content. A neighbor's door cracked open down the hall and immediately closed again. I stepped fully out into the hallway and pulled my apartment door shut behind me. This wasn't happening inside my space. I told her what had actually mattered to me. Being with someone real. Someone who says what they mean. Someone who doesn't run our relationship through her friends, like it's a focus group to see which version of it performs better online. She said it wasn't like that. I listed what it was like. She had her friends set up cameras. She scripted her lines. She picked the busiest window at the busiest location in the city. I asked her what category that fell into if not like that. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "A mistake." A mistake is forgetting a birthday. I told her this was a deliberate decision to manipulate me for content. Her face went white. She asked how I even knew about the content. How I knew any of it. I told her I heard everything Wednesday evening. Their entire planning session, every camera position, the conversation about how I'd look desperate while she looked composed. All of it. I knew before she'd ever mentioned the crepe place. She took a step backward against the hallway wall, like I'd physically moved her. She said, "You knew. The whole time, you knew." I told her I knew, before she suggested going to Belmont Market at all. She asked why I let her go through with it, why I just walked into it. I told her she wanted to test me. I showed her exactly who I am. Someone who won't perform for an audience. Someone who respects what's said out loud, even when the person saying it doesn't fully mean it. Someone who doesn't beg people to stay, who've chosen to leave. Tears were building in her eyes. But I wasn't finished. Words carry weight, I told her. Actions have consequences. You can't say you're ending a relationship and then expect someone to ignore those words because you didn't fully mean them. That's not how it works with people who take things seriously. She said we could still fix it. I asked how. By posting an apology video? Telling her followers she'd manipulated her boyfriend for engagement? She flinched visibly at the word manipulated. I told her what I'd actually learned about her that week. When she had to choose between our relationship and her online image, she chose the image. When she had to choose between the advice of real friends and influencer logic, she chose the influencer logic. When it came to authentic content versus manufactured drama, she picked drama every single time. And she didn't even seem to notice the pattern until it blew up in her face. She said that wasn't fair. I reminded her there were 3 camera angles pointed at me. She rehearsed her lines. She chose the busiest spot at the busiest time of day. I asked her which piece of that was unfair. The hallway went quiet, just the low hum of the building's ventilation. I softened my voice but held the line. I told her I deserved someone who didn't need proof of my love on a regular basis. Someone who believed me when I showed up every single day. Someone who wouldn't put me through something like that to impress people who don't know either of us. She said she did believe me. She said she knew I loved her. I told her if she'd known, she wouldn't have needed to test it. I put my hand on my door handle. She said, "So we're just done? That's it?" I said we were done on Saturday at 2:07 in the afternoon, when she told me this wasn't working for her. The only difference now was that she understood why. I went inside and closed the door quietly. She stood in the hallway for several minutes. Then I heard her walk toward the elevator. "Wait, let me jump in here. That line, we were over Saturday at 2:07 when you told me this wasn't working for you. That's not cruelty. That's precision." He held her to her own words. No drama, no anger, no drawn-out argument going nowhere. Just a clean, firm accounting of what she chose. She came looking for a way back in. He closed every door without once raising his voice. And there's nothing harder to argue with than someone who simply won't give you an opening. She came for a fight and got a mirror instead. 2 days later, I was at an outdoor table having lunch with Leo near my building. September weather, pleasant and still. Leo was asking about a complicated client situation when I noticed Brooke walking past on the sidewalk with 2 women I didn't recognize. She saw me, stopped, and in what I can only describe as a genuinely spectacular lapse in judgment, she walked directly to our table. She said she was surprised to see me out and about, thought I'd be home alone feeling sorry for myself. I looked up from my menu, genuinely caught off guard that she'd approached. I asked why I'd be feeling sorry for myself. She said my girlfriend just broke up with me, that most guys in my position would be devastated, crying into their coffee or whatever. Leo set down his fork and watched this exchange with full attention. I corrected her. Ex-girlfriend. She made her choice and I respected it. That's what adults do. Brooke turned to Leo and spoke at a volume that was clearly intended for the surrounding tables. She said this was the problem with men now. No passion, no fight. Just give up at the first sign of difficulty. No romance in it. I took a slow sip of water, set the glass down carefully. Then I asked, "Is that what you're all going with? That I gave up?" She crossed her arms, said Melissa wanted me to fight for her, and I just walked away. I looked at her steadily. The nearby tables were already starting to tune in. Good. I said the truth was, she'd convinced Melissa to stage a fake breakup, film it from 3 angles, and post it for content. The truth was, she scripted what Melissa should say, coached her on staying composed while I fell apart, and planned the whole production like she was directing an episode of something. Brooke's face went several shades lighter. Her 2 friends looked at each other. People at neighboring tables had gone quiet. I kept going. I told her I'd overheard their entire planning session the Wednesday before. Every word. The camera positioning. The backup moves in case I didn't react correctly. The hashtag conversation. All of it. Every detail. Leo stared at Brooke with an expression I'd never quite seen on him before. Brooke said I was making it sound worse than it was. Her voice had dropped considerably. I asked if I was. They'd wanted to film a man being humiliated in a public space for entertainment. They'd wanted to capture genuine pain and then monetize it. When I refused to perform, when I didn't give them what they needed, they couldn't post the footage. Because what it actually showed was Melissa being exactly what she was in that moment. A few people at nearby tables had their phones out now, not even pretending otherwise. Brooke started to say something about helping Melissa understand her relationship. I cut her off. She was trying to create viral content. And now that it hadn't worked, she'd come here to shame me for not delivering the performance they scripted. Leo spoke up, playing it perfectly. Hold on, they actually set this up. Like multiple cameras? Belmont Market, Saturday at 2 p.m. Most crowded window of the week. Whitney at a nearby table with a tripod. Jenna at the coffee stand. 3 angles for editing flexibility. Brooke stepped back from our table, face flushed. She said this was a private matter. I said she made it public the moment she set up cameras and chose a crowded market on a Saturday. She just didn't get the public reaction she was counting on. She wanted a man begging his girlfriend not to leave. She got a man with enough self-respect to accept a stated decision and walk away without making a scene. She retreated across the patio to a table with her 2 friends. I watched them hunch together, whispering, throwing glances in my direction. Then I went back to my menu like nothing had happened, though my hands were running a little on adrenaline. Leo said quietly, "Dude, that was ice cold." I told him it wasn't cold. It was honest. There's a difference. Okay, hold on. Just let me be here for a second. Brooke walked up to his table, voluntarily, to do to him in public exactly what she'd coached Melissa to do. And Kevin just turned it around completely. Every detail, out loud, in front of people with phones in their hands. She showed up to deliver a performance and ended up being the subject of someone else's. Kevin didn't plan that. He just told the truth clearly, without flinching. Sometimes that's enough. The situation handled the rest. By Friday evening, a short clip had started making rounds online. Someone at one of the nearby tables had been recording the exchange with Brooke. The caption described a man calling out influencers who'd staged a fake breakup for content. It had around 430,000 views by the time I saw it. The comments were finding Brooke's accounts, then Melissa's. The internet had rendered its verdict and was making sure both of them heard it loudly. I didn't track the drama closely. That was never the point. But I did notice that Melissa's father apparently saw the video because Saturday morning she texted me. She said her dad had called, that he was disappointed in her, that he told her he didn't raise her to treat people like props. Then a second message. She said she knew she probably didn't deserve a response, but she needed me to know she understood what she'd done, that she'd hurt me, that she'd disrespected me, that she'd chosen validation from strangers on the internet over someone who actually loved her. She said I was right about everything. An hour later, another message. She'd cut off Brooke, Whitney, and Jenna completely. She was done trying to build a following. She was taking everything down except for a private account for actual family and close friends. That one got my attention. That was a serious step, not just words. One final message. You said you deserved someone who doesn't need to test your love. You're right. I hope you find her. I hope she never makes the mistakes I did. I set my phone down and sat with that for a long time. Final update. 2 weeks later, Melissa reached out and asked if we could meet once more, just to talk. She suggested the cafe at the Lakeside Arts Museum. Neutral, public, quiet. Something in the message made me decide to go. She was already at a table when I arrived. She looked different, less produced. No carefully selected outfit, no camera-ready presentation. Just jeans, a plain sweater, and a face that looked like it had been doing some real work lately. More like the person I'd met 2.5 years ago than the version I'd been living with recently. She thanked me for coming. Then she pushed an envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $3,000. I asked what it was. She said it was the money she'd made from brand deals over the past 6 months. Money she'd collected, at least in part, by posting about our life together. She said it wasn't right for her to keep it. She wanted me to have it, or to donate it to whatever I thought made sense. She said she couldn't keep profiting from something she'd corrupted. I told her I didn't want her money. She said she knew, but she needed to give it somewhere. It was the only concrete thing she could actually do. I studied her face for a moment. She looked tired in the specific way people look when they've actually been honest with themselves for the first time in a while. Something clearer in her eyes than I'd seen in a long time. She said she also wanted to tell me in person, something she'd only managed to send in texts. When her dad called after he saw the video, she heard the actual disappointment in his voice. Not anger, just real, quiet disappointment. He told her he didn't even recognize who she'd become. She paused. Said it was the way he said it, like he was describing a stranger. That was what finally broke through. I told her dad was a good man. She said he'd asked her what she thought was going to happen. Whether she actually believed I was just going to forgive everything and we'd go back to normal. She told him no. She told him she knew I was too clear-eyed for that. Too honest with myself about what I actually deserved. I nodded. She said she was leaving the city, moving out of state to work for her cousin's catering company. She needed to get out of the environment that had made any of this seem like a reasonable thing to do. New city, different pace, actual ground under her feet. I told her that sounded like the right move. She looked at me for a moment. She said she loved me. That underneath all the performance and the content chasing and the constant need for validation from people who didn't know either of us, she genuinely loved me. I told her I knew that, but she couldn't trust it anymore, and neither could I. She nodded slowly. I could see the tears forming, but she kept them from falling. She said she'd learned something real from all of it. You can't test love. You either trust it or you don't. And if you don't trust it, you don't actually have it. You just have something that looks like it from the outside. She stood, pulled on her coat, and said she hoped someday I'd be able to remember the good parts of us. The parts that existed before she made the choices she made. I told her I would. I'd remember all of it. That was how you actually learn from things. She left. I sat alone for a few minutes, then took out my phone. I photographed the check, looked up a local organization that worked with domestic violence survivors. People who knew something about actual relationship damage, not manufactured drama, and donated the full $3,000 to them. 3 months later, December had come in cold and clear. I was at the Millennium Rink with Claire and her 2 kids. Christmas lights covered everything in the plaza, the kind of glow that only makes sense in winter cities at night. My niece was demanding a race around the rink for the 3rd time. I was pretending to be exhausted while she yanked on both my hands. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. Unknown number. It was a text from Jenna. She said she wasn't sure I'd remember her, that she'd been one of Melissa's friends. She said she wanted to apologize for her role in everything that had happened, that it was cruel, and she should have said no from the start. She'd stopped chasing an influencer career. Some things turned out not to be worth what they cost. She hoped I was doing well. I read it twice, thought about not responding, then typed, "I appreciate the apology. Good luck with whatever comes next." I put the phone away and turned back to the rink. Claire skated up beside me, asked who that was. "Someone learning that actions have consequences," I told her. She smiled and asked if I'd learned anything too. I looked around at the rink, the lights, the city I loved, the people who actually showed up. Yeah. I learned I don't need to perform for anyone's approval. I learned that my limits are worth holding, even when it costs something. And I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just say okay and walk away clean. Any regrets about how I handled it? Not one. I took my niece's hand and we skated out into the evening, the city lights running all the way across the skyline. Here's the thing Melissa's whole crew never figured out. You cannot script someone else's reaction when that person already knows exactly who they are. They could set up all the cameras they wanted, pick the busiest location, rehearse the lines 100 times. None of it mattered the moment Kevin decided he wasn't performing. He didn't win by out-arguing them. He won by refusing to play. And that turned their entire production into unusable footage. So here's the question for the comments. Is walking away quietly the ultimate power move, or does it let people off the hook too easy? Drop your take below. And if this one hit, subscribe and leave a like. More where this came from.